Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I've debated posting this at all, but I feel like I need to get it out somewhere. This happened when I was a sophomore at a school in the Northeast. I'm not nomming it. I was in a sorority, an English major, and pretty focused on my grades because I wanted to apply to law school after graduating. That part matters more than it probably sounds like it should. That semester I took an upper-level class on English Romanticism. It was small, maybe 24 students, mostly juniors and seniors. There was a professor on paper, but the day-to-day discussions were run by the TA. Everyone called him Roar. That was actually his name, or at least the only one he ever used. I never figured out if it was his first or last name. He was in his late 20s, thin, kind of awkward in a way that felt deliberate, like someone who wanted to seem interesting by being strange but didn't quite pull it off. The class itself wasn't bad. Lots of close reading, lots of talking about nature, memory, and all the standard romantic themes. The problem was that no one wanted to talk. Most days were just long stretches of silence while people stared at their desks. Roar clearly hated that. When it went on too long, he'd start calling on people at random and making little comments when they didn't have anything insightful to say. There was one person who usually kept things moving. His name was Luke. He was tall, brown hair, and I knew he was in one of the more popular fraternities. He had good timing. He'd crack a joke when things got uncomfortable, not enough to derail the conversation, just enough to reset it. And he actually did the reading. When he spoke, it was obvious he understood the material, so the humor never felt forced. He wasn't trying to be funny for attention. People just listened to him. At the time, I thought he seemed smart and a little goofy. Since participation counted and I cared about my GPA, I ended up talking a lot too. Most classes, it was me, Luke, and a handful of others doing the work while everyone else stayed quiet. Roar seemed to notice. When I spoke, he'd nod, sometimes pick up on my point and expand it, which felt encouraging in a way that's hard to explain unless you've been in that situation. On my first paper, I remember this clearly, I wrote about ambiguity in one of Wordsworth's poems. It wasn't especially original, but I liked it. When it was returned, Roar had filled the margins with comments. Not just corrections, but long notes engaging with what I'd written, agreeing with me in places. It felt good. After that, things started to feel slightly off. Roar paid more attention to me during discussions. He called on me more than before, asked follow-up questions, held eye contact a little too long. I told myself I was reading into it. TAs favor students all the time. It didn't have to mean anything. When his questions drifted away from the material, I brushed it aside. I had enough going on without overthinking it. Around then, I also started seeing Luke everywhere outside of class. Our houses overlapped socially, so we were at the same mixers, parties, and events all the time. I don't take Greek life that seriously, but we were both in what people would probably call top houses, so our paths kept crossing. Eventually, we just started talking more. I ended up liking him. After a few weeks, he asked if I wanted to get dinner, and I said yes. We went out a few times, and things moved forward naturally. He was attentive and easy to be around. We slept together, and it all felt uncomplicated. I wasn't obsessing over him, but I enjoyed being with him. It didn't feel heavy. One afternoon after class, I was walking to my car and saw Luke behind the building, smoking a cigarette with Roar. They were talking casually like they knew each other. It struck me as strange. I didn't even know Luke smoked. Later, when I asked him about it, he laughed and said he was just trying to stay on Roar's good side so the rest of the semester would be easier. I told him that was kind of sad. He said he'd rather be sad than stressed about grades. A few weeks after that, I came back to his place and noticed his phone on the bed next to him, a video playing. I know I shouldn't have looked, I know that, but curiosity won. I went through it. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. What I found was a folder of photos of me, a lot of them. Some were harmless, me studying, walking across campus, things like that. Others weren't. Some were pictures I remembered sending him. Others I didn't remember taking at all. I wasn't angry so much as unsettled. It felt invasive, even though part of me knew that if he'd asked, I probably wouldn't have said no. I didn't wake him up. I put the phone back and went to sleep, lying there trying to sort out how I felt. I never told anyone about it. I was embarrassed, and I didn't want him to know I'd gone through his phone. About a week later, after he'd fallen asleep again, I tried unlocking his phone. It didn't take long. The password was just his birthday flipped around. This time I didn't stop at the surface. I went through everything: texts, archived threads, deleted photos. That's when I found what actually made my stomach drop. He'd been sending pictures of me to a number that wasn't saved in his contacts, not once or twice, regularly, for weeks. Basically the entire time we'd been together, the same photos I'd already seen and others. It felt violating in a way I didn't have words for. I started shaking so badly I had to sit down. I took screenshots of everything I could think of, and then I just started crying. I couldn't stop. I woke him up abruptly and asked him who the number belonged to. He was half asleep and panicked, and he immediately started rambling about how it was his backup phone, how he liked having copies of things in case something happened to his main one. The lie was obvious. I didn't argue. I grabbed my things and left before he could say anything else. I was not okay after that. I was barely functioning. I don't want to describe that period in detail. It was awful, and I still don't like thinking about it. There are reasons I'm being vague, and part of it is self-preservation. I don't want this traced back to me. Just know that it was easily the worst stretch of my life. Eventually, it came out that the number belonged to Roar, the TA. The police got involved, and Luke didn't hold out very long once they started questioning him. He admitted that Roar had been paying him hundreds of dollars for the photos. According to him, it had been happening since early in the semester, maybe even before I started dating Luke. I don't know, and I didn't ask. Luke was expelled. Roar was fired. I believe there were criminal charges, too, though I remember feeling like none of it really matched what they'd done. That was about 1.5 years ago. I'm a senior now, almost finished. In some ways, that's a relief. I've handled things how I've handled them, and for a while, it felt like it was finally over. Then a few weeks ago, I noticed something that I can't stop thinking about. There's a silver sedan that's been parked near my sorority late at night. Not every night, but often enough that it stands out. I've never seen anyone inside it. I don't know if it's connected to any of this. It could be nothing. I keep telling myself that, but it's unsettling. I don't even know how anyone involved would know where I live now. I moved into this house long after everything happened. If anything else happens, I'll update. This happened about 2 weeks ago. I'm still not completely past it, but keeping it to myself hasn't helped, so I'm putting it down now. My name's Mike. Most people call me Mikey. I'm 22 and I still live with my parents in Northern California. And no, not the version people imagine. This area gets buried in snow. It's remote, surrounded by trees, the kind of place where the nearest neighbor is far enough away that you wouldn't hear anything they do. I've been skiing since I was a kid, so cold weather has never really bothered me. I actually like it. That part isn't important though. What matters is that 2 weekends ago, my parents left the country for a wedding. One of my mom's friends was getting married overseas. I wasn't invited, which was fine. Having the house to myself for the weekend sounded pretty good. The house itself is simple. 1 floor, 3 bedrooms, nothing fancy. My parents' room is at one end of the hallway, mine is at the other. There's a guest room in between that mostly just holds boxes. The kitchen and living room sit in the center, and the front door opens straight into the living room. I'm laying this out now because it'll matter later. The first night alone was uneventful. I stayed up late and went to sleep around 2 in the morning, and I was out almost immediately. The second night started the same way. I went to bed around the same time, maybe a bit earlier, and I remember feeling especially tired. I didn't lie awake at all. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it was still dark out. I almost never wake up in the middle of the night, so that alone felt off. I knew something had pulled me out of sleep. My phone was on airplane mode like always, so it wasn't a notification. I lay there trying to figure it out, staring into the darkness. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. My closet door was completely open. I never leave it like that. It's a sliding door that doesn't stay shut unless you push it all the way closed, and I always do. That's something I've been particular about since I was a kid. I know I didn't forget. My chest tightened and my mind tried to convince me this was some half-awake dream state, but I knew better. I was awake. My heart was racing, and there was this heavy sense that something wasn't right. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and turned on the flashlight. I screamed the second the light came on. Two figures were standing right next to my bed. They didn't say anything. They didn't even hesitate. As soon as the light hit them, they split apart, each one darting in a different direction like they'd been expecting it. I swung the phone around trying to keep the light on them, but they moved too fast. Something hit the floor with a sharp sound, but I didn't stop to look. I was yelling, just noise, really, pure panic with no words attached. They ran for my bedroom door. I heard their footsteps tearing down the hallway, and without thinking, I jumped out of bed and chased after them. By the time I reached the hall, the front door slammed shut. I ran into the living room, but the house was empty. I stood there shaking, breathing hard, trying to calm myself down, staring at the front door. As soon as I managed to steady myself, I ran back into my bedroom, shut the door, locked it, and called emergency services. I stayed there, sitting on the bed with the door locked, waiting for officers to arrive. After a few minutes, I turned the light on fully. That's when I noticed something on the floor near the side of my bed, whatever had made that noise when everything happened. It was one of my mom's kitchen knives. I felt sick immediately. I'm serious. I almost vomited. Whoever those people were, they had been standing there with a knife while I was asleep. If I hadn't woken up when I did, I don't think I would have woken up at all. I try not to let my thoughts go too far with that, but it's hard not to. The police arrived roughly 20 minutes later. They went through the house and checked around the property, but they didn't find anyone. They took my statement, asked the usual questions, and eventually one of the officers told me that I probably forgot to lock the front door. I told him I was sure I'd locked it, but he didn't really argue. He just said there were no signs of a break-in, and every other door and window in the house was locked from the inside. The front door was the only possible way in. I let it go and watched them leave, but I knew what I remembered. The next day my parents got home, and there was the predictable lecture about being careless and leaving the house unlocked. None of that really matters. It's been 2 weeks now, and I still don't have a real answer. Even putting the door aside, that's not the part that keeps bothering me. Why were there people standing in my bedroom with a knife? If they wanted to steal something, they could have taken whatever they wanted and left without waking me. At first, I assumed they must have known my parents were out of the country. But the more I think about it, the harder it is to believe that normal burglars would put themselves in a position like that, or have any reason to do something worse. My name is Natasha. This started around 3 months ago, right after I split up with my ex Tibet. I was 23 at the time and had just moved into my first apartment by myself after years of sharing places with roommates since college. It wasn't anything impressive, just a one-bedroom in a medium-sized complex in Columbus, Ohio. I work remotely, so I'm home most of the day. That was actually the whole point. I was exhausted from trying to work, while people argued in the kitchen or blasted music in the background. My unit was on the second floor, facing the back of the complex. The view was mostly parked cars and a line of trees beyond that. Nothing pretty, but it didn't matter to me. What mattered was having my own space, my own routine, and privacy I'd never really had before. The first couple of weeks were uneventful. I didn't really talk to anyone. There was an older woman downstairs who always seemed to be at the mailboxes whenever I passed through the lobby, and a couple across the hall who argued loudly enough that I could hear them through the wall. Other than that, everyone kept to themselves. About 3 weeks after I moved in, I noticed him for the first time. I was coming back from the gym around 8 in the evening, heading up the stairs to my floor when someone was coming down at the same time. He was a white guy, probably late 30s or early 40s, average height and build, wearing a gray hoodie. Completely forgettable, honestly. We did that brief, awkward sidestep dance, then he squeezed past me without saying a word. I barely registered it. A few days later, I saw him again in the parking lot. I was leaning into my car grabbing something when I noticed him standing near the dumpsters. He wasn't throwing anything away, just standing there. When I glanced over, he turned and walked off around the building. It didn't feel strange enough to dwell on, so I didn't. The third time was when it started to stick in my head. I was at my desk in the middle of the afternoon, working during a call. My desk faces the window that looks out over the parking lot. I happened to glance outside and saw a navy blue car parked below that I didn't recognize. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat. I couldn't make out his face, but I could tell he was looking up toward the building, toward my floor, maybe even my window. I watched for a moment, then focused back on work. When I checked again 10 minutes later, the car was gone. I don't know why, but that stayed with me. After that, I started noticing him more. Or maybe I'd always been seeing him and just hadn't paid attention before. He was in the parking lot a lot, not constantly, but enough that it began to feel repetitive. Sometimes he'd be walking through, other times sitting in that same blue car, which I eventually realized belonged to him. Once, I saw him standing near the stairwell, scrolling on his phone. He never openly stared at me, or if he did, I never caught him doing it. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that he always seemed positioned in places where my apartment would be in view. I kept telling myself I was reading too much into it. The complex wasn't huge. If two people lived there and kept similar schedules, of course they'd cross paths. I'd never seen him follow me. He never spoke to me or approached me. He was just there. Then something happened that I couldn't just brush off. I'm very routine-oriented. I go to the same gym at roughly the same time most evenings, and a couple nights a week I stop at the same fast casual place on the way home. It's about a 15-minute drive from my apartment in a totally different part of town. You don't pass it accidentally. You go there because you mean to. One night I was sitting inside, eating alone and scrolling on my phone. I looked up and my stomach dropped. He was there. The same guy. Same build, same face, same gray hoodie. He was sitting at a table across the place, eating like it was completely normal. I remember feeling genuinely nauseous for a moment. Not fear exactly, more like my body reacting before my brain could catch up. There was no logical reason for him to be there. The gym I use is nowhere near that area. The restaurant isn't close to anything else you'd casually stop at. It felt too specific. I tried to talk myself down. It's a popular place. People eat dinner. That alone didn't mean anything. But then I noticed his eyes. He wasn't staring outright, but he kept glancing up at me, then back down at his food, then up again. Just enough that I noticed. And when I stood up to leave, I'm almost certain he started packing up his stuff too. I didn't linger. I walked quickly to my car, not running but close, and got inside. I locked the doors and sat there for a second, just breathing. When I looked back toward the windows, I couldn't see him anymore. I don't know if he came out or stayed inside, but I wasn't going to wait around to find out. On the drive home, I kept checking my mirrors. I didn't see anyone behind me, but I took a few random turns anyway. It didn't really make sense, since he already knew where I lived, but I wasn't exactly thinking clearly. When I got back, I didn't even turn the lights on. I sat in the dark for almost an hour, watching the parking lot through my window. I never saw him or that blue sedan. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and I convinced myself I'd spiraled over nothing and went to sleep. The next morning, I looked outside like I'd been doing every day since this all started. The sedan was there again, and someone was sitting inside it. That was when I finally called the police. I felt ridiculous even dialing. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding dramatic or unstable, just that there was a man I kept seeing who made me uncomfortable. I explained everything anyway. The officer on the phone was polite but clearly unconcerned. He said they could send someone to check things out, but unless the guy was committing a crime or trespassing, there wasn't much they could do. He suggested I keep notes, dates, times, anything unusual, and take photos if I could. If things escalated, I should call back. By the time a patrol car arrived, about 45 minutes later, the sedan was gone. The officer walked around the complex, knocked on a few doors, and came back with exactly what I expected. No reports, no suspicious activity, nothing obvious. He handed me his card and told me to reach out if anything else happened. After that, things went quiet for about a week. I started to relax again. I told myself maybe the police showing up had scared him off, or maybe I'd let stress and isolation get the better of me, and I just needed time to settle back into normal. Then I found the note. It had been pushed under my door sometime overnight. I noticed it first thing in the morning when I got up. It was handwritten, just a single line. You should really close your blinds at night. I dropped it the second I read it. Not on purpose. My hands just let go. I remember scrambling to pick it back up, my fingers shaking so badly I almost tore the paper. That was the moment the fear stopped feeling abstract. It was heavy and immediate, like realizing you're already too late to do something about a situation. I moved out 2 weeks later. I didn't wait out the lease. I paid the fee, packed what I could, and left. I told myself that was it. I went back to my parents' house and figured I'd stay there until I could find somewhere else to live. If that had been the end, I wouldn't be telling this now. About a month after I moved back home, I was driving back from the gym, different gym, near my parents' place, and I saw it. A navy blue sedan parked along a side street, a couple blocks from their neighborhood. I recognized it instantly. There was no doubt in my mind it was the same car. I drove the rest of the way home faster than I probably should have, trying not to panic. I didn't notice anyone behind me, but somehow that didn't help. If it really was him, then not being followed meant he might already know exactly where I was headed. As soon as I got inside, I told my parents everything. My dad said he'd start paying closer attention to the street, and my mom immediately went around checking every lock. Since then, they've both been more alert. My dad even brought up installing a camera near the front porch. It's been about 2 weeks now, and I haven't seen the car again. Part of me keeps trying to convince myself it was just another similar vehicle, and that stress is messing with my head. But I know what I saw. I don't know how he would have found me, and I don't want to dwell on what it means if he did. The idea that someone could be deliberately tracking my life is something I try not to sit with for too long. I'm honestly afraid to go anywhere alone. I've thought about calling the police again, but I don't even know what I'd say that I haven't already said. Hopefully, the story needs no updates.